Hello, I'm John Chivacco, the co-chair of the NY-GEO 2023 conference and a board member of the New York Geothermal Energy Organization. I'd like to welcome you to this recording of a live presentation from the conference, a two-day event which was held in Albany, New York on April 26th and 27th of 2023. This year's educational sessions and keynotes represent the latest in ground source heat pump system design, product innovations, and installation practices, along with important policy, regulatory, financing, and incentive updates. This presentation is one of over 40 sessions from the two-day event, all of which were recorded and available at NY-GEO's website, www.ny-geo.org, along with session descriptions and a link to download the slides from each of the sessions presented. NY-GEO is proud to make this content available to our members and other industry stakeholders, and if you are a member, thanks so much for your support and participation. If you find this content valuable and for some odd reason you are not yet a member, consider joining NY-GEO at the appropriate membership level with details available at our website. The live recording from the NY-GEO 2023 conference will start in just a moment. Thanks so much for listening.
Good afternoon, everybody. Here we are, day 2, and after lunch, so I hope we're going to stay awake and lively in this panel. We're going to try to keep it fast-paced for you. My name is Venetia Lannon, and I'm with Edison. I am also a New York GEO board member. And today we're going to be talking about energy as a service. And I think many of you know that some of the barriers to GEO really taking off are the high upfront costs, right? And obviously the IRA has done a lot, like we heard this morning, to help with that. But it's still a challenge. So the question of third-party ownership is important. I was talking to someone at lunch who said this is what really helped solar kind of take off, and this is really an important frontier for GEO. Third-party ownership, so that means either somebody comes in and owns the system and then sort of leases it back over time. So we have a great panel lined up for you, folks who have experience in this realm, who are going to talk to you about their ideas and some different models about how we can break through this barrier. So first off, I'm going to call up Tony Amos, the famous? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
My name's Tony Amos. I work for Endurant Energy. We were previously known as GI Energy, and before that Geothermal International. We've got over 20 years of experience in the geothermal world, beginning in the UK, and now more recently here in the US. So a lot of experience. We've gone through quite a few owners, one of which was Shell a few years ago. But we're now owned by LS Power, and they've got a pretty dynamic portfolio that cover all of our clients' strategic energy needs when we need it. They've got over 11,000 megawatts of power generation and 660 miles of transmission infrastructure, and they've got very deep pockets with $10 billion worth of equity capital that we can commit to energy infrastructure. They certainly provide a very strong foundation to who we are. We bought GeoOptimize last year to help strengthen and build the geothermal offering and become what we hope to be is that company that delivers the complete solution. And over the last 20 years, for me, that has been the crucial component, delivering the complete solution, taking ownership of what we design, making sure the energy modeling is done correctly as best as possible. And then we do the design on the back of that. The energy model is always the crown jewels of everything that we do. So a lot of time is spent on that. And then obviously as we go through that process, we're making sure that what gets built is what we designed, installed to the right depths, things like that. And then more importantly, once the building goes live, we're then monitoring the system performance. What's actually happening is crucial. Going back to that energy model that we did in the design, potentially 3 or 4 years previously, making sure those assumptions were correct are absolutely crucial. And the beauty of the system optimization, the controls, is we can then start to tweak the performance and optimize and deliver greater energy savings for the client ultimately. So this time next year, I'm hoping to give you some information from a project that we've just completed at 561 Greenwich, where we've put quite a lot of monitoring in for that. So we'll be able to start seeing the performance. But importantly, we need to go back to that energy model, making sure those assumptions were correct and making some fine adjustments. So it's delivering the complete solution. The first stage of any project, as far as we're concerned, is the feasibility. So getting the customer comfortable. And there's been a massive, massive challenge for the last 15, 20 years that I've been doing this. So 5 Ps has been a big principle of mine. Proper planning prevents poor performance. You can add a 6P in there, but I won't. That's kind of... So spending time at the beginning with customers, setting out kind of a clear strategy of what are the right solutions, identifying the right solution. I've heard a lot about boreholes and the concerns about drilling boreholes in New York City. Well, there's a whole host of other solutions that need to be looked at. MTA water, energy foundations, heat from sewage. Let's explore those in city centre sites. There's more than just drilling boreholes. It's looking outside the box. And then very importantly, when you present a price to a client, don't just tell them what the CapEx is. You should never, ever make a decision based on CapEx. OpEx is so much more important than CapEx. Life cycle cost analysis. So, again, building that confidence, overcoming challenges. I mean, we look at all these options. There's so many, there's geology. There's a whole host of the IRA. It's a bit of a nightmare. So it's making sure that we can provide that confidence and demonstrate that CapEx and, importantly, that OpEx ultimately. And then, if the client's interested, we can offer the energy as a service type approach. And that's what we've been offering here in the US for probably the last 7 or 8 years. And we are operating 3 1 megawatt batteries through the Con Edison RFP. We're hoping to install a 4th one at some point, but we can't find a suitable site for it. So energy as a service can be applied to all those technologies, and some of the solutions that we are building wouldn't just be geothermal. If you're trying to get net zero, you need to mix them with other solutions. So how is an energy as a service structured? And ultimately what we're looking to do is to provide that special purpose vehicle and remove the CapEx that we've identified for the customer and ultimately de-risk the financing of that project. Take it off their balance sheet completely, and then we become that utility provider. And ultimately delivering the heating and cooling as a service, and maybe the electricity too. And then providing that long-term management and maintenance that I mentioned, being absolutely crucial to providing the optimization of the solution. So what are the benefits of energy as a service? In addition to overcoming CapEx challenges, energy as a service mitigates risks for the customer. And there's a whole host of benefits that are listed there. Can bring a lot of benefits, de-risk the solution for the client, and I think taking ownership of the complete solution and being responsible for what is installed at the end of the day should provide the customer with that confidence that these guys know what they're building. They're going to take ownership of it and provide that long-term management. So if something goes wrong with the system, once it's operational, we'll be there to sort it out. And I think that was probably me. How did I do? You didn't raise any more flags.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you
so while this is loading up, I'll just share something that resonated with me. I thought it was on both sides. Got it. Something that resonated with me last night. I can't remember if it was Bill or John who said this, but about having new faces in the group. I'll put up my hand as being a relatively new face to the NY-GEO group, and I just want to commend all those who've been part of this for many years, that it's been growing. This is certainly an organization that Subterra and myself are going to be a part of in a big way moving forward, and we'll be proud to do so. So kudos to all those folks. Okay, so we've got 7 minutes here to get through a lot of slides, and I think there'll be some stuff that will be somewhat similar to what Tony mentioned. Just to give a quick background, for our company, Subterra Renewables is a utility developer for geothermal energy projects. We've got about 300 million worth of assets under management, contracts under management and development. We're vertically integrated as well with a drilling division. We've got a drill fleet of over 50 rigs based out of Toronto, service across Canada and into the US now. So this is something that we've been putting a lot of time, effort, thought into for the last number of years, and so hopefully I can share a couple pieces of things that we've learned over the last few. Okay, good. So just to set the baseline, my presentation usually goes for a little bit longer. I like to cover two main pieces of this. Number one is the sort of financial overview of how we should be thinking about geothermal systems. Obviously, everybody in this room here has heard that geosystems are CapEx heavy, right? They're too expensive. I know I want to build this way, but we can't afford it. Typically what I say when folks are thinking that way is that they're being myopic and short-sighted. That's only half of the equation is the CapEx. Again, to echo Tony, we have to be thinking about the OpEx, right? And so, yes, there's a little bit more investment at the start, but because of the utility savings and some of the things I'll touch on here in a moment, we've actually got a large number of operational savings. And if you can take a long-term view of the project, which as an investor in geothermal projects like we are, for example, there's great economics to be found. So something I just want to point out as we're talking about this is rethinking the mechanical room. So obviously we know that we're installing geothermal loops into the ground, but very importantly, we're removing a number of the traditional mechanical components from penthouse in, an example of a point tower multi-unit res building, which has really significant impact, right? When we're removing chiller, boiler, cooling tower, that changes things greatly. Namely, removing that space allows us to take that penthouse space, the most valuable space in a building of this type, and change it to outdoor amenity, additional saleable, additional leasable, right? This is the most valuable space out there. We're up in Toronto right now. Condominium square footage is going for about $1,200 to $1,500 a square foot. So when you look at the additional savings that you can have by removing penthouse space, that can be a very significant capital savings to the developer. On the energy services model that I'll talk about in a moment here, there's also a big savings from the developer's point of view on their pro forma. So they're thinking in a traditional model, I have to pay for my boiler, chiller, cooling tower. When we engage them in an energy as a service type contract, they get to now scratch those off of their pro forma. So they're actually saving capital from day one, right? So because they save capital from day one and have an operating savings that's going to be, or an operating cost that's going to be equal or less than the conventional, you get the win up front and on the long term. The other thing to think about when you're removing those pieces of equipment is not only the utility savings, but also the repair, maintenance, and service for those pieces of equipment, right? When we remove big machines with with a lot of moving parts, all of those operating costs also come down drastically, and a lot of times those pieces aren't thought of. So when we look at the whole picture together, again, the operating savings can be quite significant, and there's a good investment opportunity to be made. So I'll talk, excuse me, I'll talk a little bit more specifically about the energy service product that we offer. We brand our product as the Aura system, so we want to be having people who are thinking about this product not as just something that's in the ground, but we want to say, we want end users, tenants, et cetera, to say, I want the granite countertop, the gas range, well, not the gas range in this case, obviously, the granite countertop, the Nest thermostat, and the Aura system, right? We really want to try to sell that brand. So what is energy as a service? It's a contract where we enter and engage with the developer, typically join the capital stack, provide the capital to build the geothermal systems, and enter into a long-term contract. Typically, these are between 30 and 50 years, whereby the building will pay back the contract for a thermal utility fee. We call it a renewable energy fee. And this can be applicable in multiple different cases, greenfield retrofit district. There's different ways to partner depending on the client's appetite. Again, Tony mentioned the SPV, which is the vehicle that holds the geothermal asset. We can start bringing limited partners into that vehicle and have them gain from the tax benefit, join the capital stack, get some of the return, et cetera. There's a lot of creative things that we can do there. We also are in the business of acquiring, so insofar as anybody's got a geothermal system out there that is currently operating, we go out and purchase these systems. If they're underperforming, we'll go and inject the capital to bring them up to performance. And then it doesn't just end at geothermal. Of course, that's a large part of the business, but we've also got complementing systems that work with hydronics, like wastewater and other pieces. Okay, so I spoke on that. I just want to reiterate a couple things here because we're running short on time, but the big piece of this, again, that is really attractive for our clients is that there's zero capital costs and operating savings. Again, that stems from this ability or from this function of again, the higher capital cost, but the lower operating cost. I'll just jump to this slide. This is sort of what an end-use breakdown looks like for the cost. On the left-hand side, this is a baseline carrying cost, I'll say. Electricity, natural gas, this is a conventional type system. Plus, you can see maintenance and capital reserves, make up water, service, all of those things. On the right-hand side, this is what our fee structure typically looks like. Still, the input energy is borne by the end user. Plus, they pay a renewable energy fee. This is a flat fee that's locked in over the contract, so they know exactly what the price is going to be, offering a lot of price certainty. And generally, what we find, again, because we've got such strong operating savings, is that the end user benefits usually about 10% less than what they would have in their conventional system. So that's sort of the secret sauce or the summary of how the business case looks to the end user. Just really quickly here, a couple things. I think this is maybe stuff that we'll get into after, but just a little bit about the process and what we offer as part of our service. All of the initial modeling work, borehole testing, et cetera, as part of the contract. Like I said, we do have our own drill fleet. We're a vertically integrated company, so we're going to come out onto site, do all the drilling, install the loop, which is really important to us if we're going to be the owner of the asset of the geothermal loop. We want to control the quality. That's a very important aspect for us. So we do the construction. We manage all of the design, of course, as well. And then over that 30-year contract, we're the asset manager. So we maintain, we operate, we make sure that the system is staying within the design parameters. And just the last slide here, a little bit of detail around the ownership structure, which we might get into a little bit more later. But typically the way to think about it is we'll own the plant equipment and the loops. Everything on the air side, the distribution is typically the responsibility of the building. We will own, again, the loops, the pumps, heat exchanger, any plant equipment, and draw a line at the utility room. So that's it. We'll speak more after. Thank you.
So I'm Matt Piscopo. I'm with Brightcore Energy, geothermal sales engineer. Similar to Matt, this is my first NY-GEO, so really appreciate all of the road paving that has been done to get us here. It's very exciting to be in this segment of the industry, having been in the HVAC industry since my career started, to see this energy within our sector. It's very, very exciting. So similar to others, we are looking to eliminate technical and schedule risks with what the perception is a very complex applied system. Coming from other parts of the HVAC industry, it was always interesting to me that a ground loop system, especially closed loop systems, actually have no moving parts below ground. So the actual risk once the system is in operation, I couldn't really understand what that perception is, but everybody else in this room probably faces the same thing. We are looking to apply these systems with a turnkey model. We provide technical expertise from the design side. We have certified geothermal designers, professional engineers, hydrologists, geologists with several decades of experience in the field, in addition to in-house drilling capabilities. So we are rapidly building out our fleet of drill rigs. We have master drillers with decades of experience. And we're also looking to import some technologies from other areas of the world that have successfully applied geothermal for commercial buildings. One of the things that is helpful in eliminating that technical and schedule risk is also eliminating the financial risk, and that's where the energy as a service model really plays well. We're looking to do this through all cycles from the initial feasibility, which can be sometimes very daunting. You're working with building owners that are very committed to an air source, maybe a PTAC design that they are very confident in, and their designers and installers are confident in. So there is that inertia that we have to kind of get through and show that there is a road to success. Then we get into the actual implementation. Once we've gone through the design, which we do in a transparent fashion, we can do that ourselves. We can work with building owner designers if that's your preference. And that's where we actually get into the execution of the project, which we can self-perform. And we're always looking to build out, as I said, we're looking to build out our fleet of rigs almost every day as quick as we can get them. And then we get into the long-term sustainable management of the asset, as others have pointed out. These are systems that are going below ground, so you want to make sure that the long-term performance of the system is maintained. We do offer that operation and maintenance of the system to ensure that the multi-million-dollar investment that building owners are making, either on an upfront basis or on as a service basis, is going to perform over the life of the building. So we are actively engaged with a few customers right now. We aren't going to identify them because we're still going through some contractual negotiations, but we have successfully performed as a service contracts for our other verticals. In addition to providing geothermal, Brightcore also provides solar, LED, lighting retrofits. So one of the largest ones that we did was at the JetBlue Terminal 5 at JFK Airport. So this was over 7,500 lighting fixtures that were converted to LED. It ended up being a 65% reduction in their energy usage. So again, not GEO, but this is, we look to leverage this type of delivery and execution model for the geothermal systems. And again, similar, just getting very quickly into the savings analysis on what we actually provided to the end user. They had a very compelling case to have a relatively low, monthly installation cost versus that large upfront annual cost. Same thing that we're trying to do with GEO. You have a very large applied system that you're trying to just get on a low monthly payment to make it more palatable. And just lastly, before we get into the design highlights on the geothermal systems that we have successfully installed or are currently installing, we're very fortunate that we have a capital partner that is looking to help deploy and finance these projects, in addition to provide that foundation for us to expand our operational capability. So one of the projects we've already talked about here is 1 Java Street. That's something where Brightcore we are doing the drilling operations for that project, and then we're getting started right now on the Beresford, which is an existing building in New York, and we're actually bringing a drill rig inside of the basement, and we're going to do a small geothermal system as part of a NYSERDA study. So we're really excited about that. There's a few others in New York. If you're ever down in the city, we'd love to take you guys on a tour of Beach Greens 2 or out to Cornell Tech. But I also want to be respectful of some time here and probably unlikely to get to some questions. So that's Brightcore, and we look forward to hearing from you guys.
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me okay? Fantastic. So hello, everyone. My name is Johnny Fry. You can see it in front of me. So I'm with Celsius Energy. I'm the business development manager here for the United States. Prior to my time at Celsius Energy, I come from a background in the energy industry, specifically hydrocarbon development, covering engineering operations in the Western U.S., et cetera. Before I get into our energy as a service offering, I really wanted to provide a brief overview of our company, our background, et cetera. So ultimately, Celsius Energy is a business line of SLB, New Energy. So SLB, which you may also know as Schlumberger or Big Blue, is a 100-year-old company. Founded in 1926, a world-leading technology provider in the energy industry, driving innovation for a balanced planet. So as you can see in the slide in the top right, our absolute DNA is in characterization of a resource, in drilling, in production, in digital solutions. We're a global company, right? So we have 90,000 plus employees, 120 countries in scope. Last year, 2022, was $28 billion in total revenue. At the bottom right, you can see our total portfolio scope. So here you can see, oil and gas, hydrocarbon development being a key part of our core. Of course, we're working to, transition all of that as much as we can to a decarbonized oil and gas type delivery model. And then subsequently on the very bottom, you have the new energy portfolio, right? You'll see hydrogen there. That's all the wonderful, colors looking at different levels of electrolysis. And so there's a tongue twister. And as well, just, lithium extraction from brines, rare earth minerals. We're looking at, of course, geothermal power generation. You might have heard of a company called Geothermex, right? It's the company within the SLB New Energy portfolio scope, as well as energy storage, bioenergy. There's a big, bright, white star here on geoenergy, which is, of course, Celsius energy. That is us decarbonizing, building heating and cooling. And what do we do as Celsius Energy? So we are absolutely focused on, scalable heating and cooling solutions. This, of course, occurs from a single building scale all the way up to a full, community, scale. This is district, this is campus, this is network solutions. One of our many pursuits ultimately is to really, expand, geothermal feasibility through site impact reductions to, cost reductions. We are, of course, exporting as much technology as we can from a very well-developed and high-technology environment, such as hydrocarbon development industry, bringing that into the geothermal building and heating and cooling space, as well as developing our own innovative, in-house solutions. And we're certainly new to this game. This is my second time being at NY-GEO. We as Celsius Energy, we started here in the U.S. in the turn of the 2021-2022 year, right? So we're just a year and a half old. In terms of a total complete scope, we're very much mature or more mature in Europe. So we're based out of Clamart, France, outside of the Paris region, doing significant geothermal heating and cooling projects throughout France as a whole. There's one really cool project you should look into is Voltaire. It's basically we are connected to the waste heat of the CERN particle accelerator, providing a geothermal heating and cooling solution to the entire city, if you will, of Voltaire in France. So with expansion in Germany, UK, Japan, all over, once again, focused on a global scale. You guys are here to talk about the US, but it's always important to give you guys a larger picture, if you will. Cutting to energy as a service. So I think there's been plenty of individuals who have given a fantastic, stepping stone type, storyline here in terms of the key benefits, why it's important, how they're uniquely doing it. Ultimately, the key here is making sure that geoenergy is accessible, right? So there's a beautiful graph on the far left. We're looking at a before or as current type situation where we've got your current energy costs, you've got all of your included maintenance for your baseline, system, be that, gas boiler, be that delivered fuels, et cetera. Ultimately, we're providing this, conversion of upfront CapEx to OpEx in order to create this contract term, which is this middle column, which is ultimately going to be this, fee-based, service for provided heating and cooling, provided energy. And then, of course, above and beyond that is going to be the actual electricity consumption happening on the building side, which is ultimately still remaining owned outside of that contract scope. Our ultimate target, once we determine total project cost, projected operational savings, is really to define that contract term. It was mentioned, I think, by Matt that he's looking at 30 to 50 years. Our time frame is 20 to 30 years, but ultimately the target is this 10% reduction in operating costs, and maintenance, right, in terms of that middle during contract period from what it was, previous from the baseline, hydrocarbon, if you will, based solution. Our absolute, focus is on a fixed cost payback. You heard Rory speak yesterday at the closing session about, how important certainty is and a fixed type payback period and being able to prepare and budget for that operational expense year in, year out over a 20 to 30 year term. So that's certainly ideal. We are also in discussions around a combination of fixed costs plus an actual energy use for some cases. Obviously, that all contributes to contract risk and appropriate, terms and such. But as everyone else has said, right, CapEx maintenance cost is owned by us, right, or a key capital partner during the contract term. At term end, we transfer the asset back to the building owner, the co-op, where they can ultimately have full realization of the operating cost reduction. And then, of course, any future maintenance would also be transferred at that point. So thank you guys so much for the opportunity.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we have intentionally left a lot of time here for your questions. I just personally feel like this is really one of the most important keys to geothermal really moving forward and competing in the established hydrocarbon world. That we really need to figure out, when you go to sell a system and you give people that that upfront cost, there's often a sticker shock that causes people to just walk away, right? And so how the conversation is even structured around costs is really critical, and I think it's really inspiring to hear all these companies that have well thought out business models about how to break through that barrier. So you've got all these experts. You've got one of the most important questions to the industry. So I really hope you guys have good thorny questions, starting with Bill, not a plant. But let's make sure we get good questions to these guys. Thanks.
Thanks. My question is for Matt from Subterra. And I wanted to know a few things. A, how many customers you currently have doing heat as a service? B, do you have a plan for expanding geographically into New York? And I right across the river.
Yeah.
And the last one is in terms of sales of a home where you have put a system in, have you run into issues with the transfer of ownership? And how does
Right.
that work?
So I'll try to answer all those questions. Currently, we've got, I think, 8 assets that are completed, operational, that have been on for a number of years, and then there's maybe, a couple dozen that are in anywhere from design, development, construction. There's obviously a long cycle. We're playing primarily in the big building space, the ICI space. We haven't done a lot in the single family home space to date. So this is a lot of condominiums, purpose-built rentals, institutional, that type of building product. The transfer of ownership does not have any risk. When we're dealing with condos, the ultimate end user of the contract is the condominium corporation. So we actually enter into the agreement with the developer of the condominium, and they then assign that contract to the condominium corporation, who becomes our counterparty in the agreement. And technically, there is an opportunity for the condominium corporation to rescind the contract within 1 year. That's why the pricing model is so important. If we have priced the product properly and we are guaranteeing that the contract value is less than what they would have paid otherwise, then there's no risk, right? If you were to go and challenge the contract, for example, we have an opportunity to make the comparison, and any logical board is not going to walk away from the contract. They would then also have to go and likely build a new conventional plant or do something like that. So we see very little risk. That's with the condo situation, for example. In a purpose-built rental or institutional client, we would enter the contract and they would be the counterparty. So we've got some diligence that we have to do, right? Like you would go to get a mortgage, you have to be approved, so to speak. We're doing something similar. We're effectively extending financing or credit, and so we've got a diligence process and a vetting process that we make sure that we're comfortable with the counterparty before we enter that agreement. But for those reasons, we see very little risk on the transfer and ultimate contractual agreement.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question kind of on the opposite side of that. When I look at the presentations here, as a building owner, I would think this would be a no-brainer. So what are you guys seeing as an impediment to 100% conversion on your sales pitches?
Great question. You know, I would say there's some inertial forces when you are working with the design and construction teams. You know, we have a lot of great geothermal minds here in this location. Not every MEP consultant or architect is comfortable with that right out of the gate. So, you know, working with especially the MEP consultant to make sure that the system design is part of, you know, one of the things that they should be including in their toolbox, and that we are available, you know, to install these systems and really eliminate that risk from them making that decision to include it as their basis of design. You know, that's one of the things that I think we see and is an important part, really the education and making sure that people are aware of what the technology is, what it isn't, and really what, you know, what it does for both building owners and also for the grid as a whole. So.
Hey, you want to pass the mic? I think it'd be good to hear from others on that. Hurdles.
Speaking from painful experience, I'm still looking for therapy. So I probably spent 18 months developing a solution for a project in Westchester. Made absolute perfect sense. Con Ed, clean heat incentive, $2.5 million. The IRA incentive would have come out. It would have been free. The developer was on board. Everybody else was on board. You couldn't get an investor in the project. And at the last moment, he got an investor. And the investor said he wanted to take no risk whatsoever. So he kind of said, you can have my money if you go gas, but not geothermal. And we spent ages trying to demonstrate it made sense. And, you know, the energy as a service de-risked his role in it. So, but painful. So yeah, do you know a good therapist?
I will say that's the importance. You know, we heard this morning somebody to say, keep an eye on the industry to make sure there aren't any rogue players who say, oh yeah, I'll put a geo system in for you, because I know in the brief stint that I spent trying to promote geothermal in Westchester on the commercial side, you know, somebody would be like, oh yeah, my brother had an experience back in 1978 and it didn't go well. And those things stick with people. And then, you know, they're like, let's just go with the sure thing. So yeah, it's challenging, but it also speaks to quality. Need for quality. Did anyone else want to add on the obstacles, or not that we want to spend all the, yeah, let's move on to happier subjects. And let me just say, you guys really speak into the mic, because I think we're here seeing some signs that it's hard to hear maybe.
So there are lots of financing models out there. So the key to this seems to be the long-term ownership and then the operation and maintenance of it over the decades-long agreement. So where do you draw the line typically between since the building is very commingled with the systems, where do you typically draw the line for what you own as an asset and are responsible for maintaining? So for instance, if you have an apartment where the geoloop is going to each apartment room, are you now responsible for the terminal unit, or do you really have your responsibility down at the geo heat exchanger? Do you include the heat pump plant, which is usually the heart of the system and the most critical? So where do you draw the line, and what sort of responsibilities do you take for the long-term maintenance?
So as I've got the mic, I'll go first. For Endurant Energy, we want to be involved with as much of the geothermal system as possible. The heat pumps and ground loops, ground loop heat exchanger, they're a marriage that needs to work for 25, 30, 100 years. So getting it right is important. There's lots of different jobs, projects where heat pumps in each of the apartments probably start to become a little bit, make the energy as a service model a bit shaky. But for us, we'd be looking to provide a control strategy that's constantly monitoring the condenser loop through the building and what's happening in the ground loop, and making sure that the temperature of the ground loop is maintained within our design parameters. So in terms of the scope, it's going to change depending on the type of building.
Yeah, I'll just second that in the sense that, you know, certainly there are distributed heat pump systems and there are centralized heat pump systems. And in terms of where energy as a service is being targeted today, we're focused on those centralized heat pump solutions, and certainly the ground loop, right? That's where your predominant CapEx, you know, hurdles exist, is on the installation of that ground loop. That's the vast majority of the ultimate cost. So the key benefits are there. And then, of course, yes, centralized heat pump.
Ditto, I guess, is the answer. We try to draw a distinction between the plant side of the system and the secondary side. Usually, with specifics, what that includes is always the loops in the ground, the geo pumps. Depending on what the design is, in a lot of res buildings where they're trying to go for a low-cost solution, they'll just have a plate and frame heat exchanger and then distributed heat pumps. So in that case, we'll draw the line usually at the plate and frame heat exchanger. In the case where we've got a centralized heat pump as part of the solution, we'll usually include that as part of the system as well. And then that allows us to sort of draw a nice box around everything and say everything downstream is going to be for you. We'll also include other things that are supplement to the system. So if we've got we're just looking through a design right now that's got an air to water heat pump as part of the supplement to the geothermal loop. So we'll include that as well. But we generally can delineate physically as well as hydronically a nice place to do that. And the reason we do that typically has to do with practicality and legality, right? You want to try to find a spot that you can say, this is our fluid, that's your fluid. If there's a leak or the glycol isn't the proper percentage, you want to be able to specifically and contractually say whose responsibility that is. And again, the nice delineation with a physical boundary, whether that's a wall or a fence, you want to be able to say, this is my space, please don't go in there. Everything else is the building's responsibility.
Ditto also, won't belabor it, but generally we're at least ending at the main valve for the manifold. Depending on the scope or specific, contract, it can extend into the building, include connected equipment, maybe all the equipment.
When you design this system for geothermal heat pump, do you also consider that if you do some retrofit for the building envelope, such as reduce the infiltration or add a little bit more insulation on the attic, it will reduce your thermal loads, and then it can also reduce your size of a heat pump, ground heat exchanger. So is that a holistic approach is considered in your practice, or do you think that necessary to integrate those low-hanging fruit, for energy saving with this geothermal heat pump design?
Yeah, great question. We, and others, we often approach the geothermal field and the building envelope. That's really a kind of a sensitivity analysis, because there are limits to what can be applied, especially for retrofits, to how tight you can make the building envelope. And again, as you're reducing your loads and making that envelope tighter, you are effectively reducing the size of your bore field. So there's certainly a balance point there, and that's part of kind of the routine, transparent way that Brightcore works with MEP engineers and architects to make sure we have the most efficient solution for the application.
Retrofit is obviously going to be a very difficult one. So the crown jewels of any geothermal project is the energy model. And for us, it's about monitoring the energy model, getting it right as best you can first off. But then when the building goes live, it's about monitoring what's actually physically happening. So, and we would very, very rarely design an all geothermal system, purely because if we, a lot of the projects we've always got ground source, air source heat pump opportunities. Climate change, it's going to get warmer and warmer. So that energy model is going to need to change over time. So when you have hybrid solutions, you've got opportunities to maintain the ground loop at the kind of design temperatures as other things change. And importantly, in retrofit projects, it's always going to be very difficult to get a real true picture of that energy model to begin with. And things change over time. And as climate change happens, the residential building will probably end up becoming more cooling dominant. And you're seeing this in a lot of the NY-GEO properties, because once a year they go around and count the air conditioning units on the windows, and they're gradually getting more and more. So by having a hybrid solution, you're able to then maintain the ground loop within the kind of the design parameters. And it also enables you to then start optimizing the ground loop as well. So you can then deliver better energy efficiency as from the ground loop and the heat pumps as a whole.
My question has to do with Sounds like a lot of it that you're working on now is new builds with private owners, and I wondered about public institutions that you might be working with. Sounds like retrofits are harder to do this, but I'm wondering about sort of the attitude towards this hybrid ownership model, and if you're finding any success in the public world of municipalities or schools, colleges and universities that are public, maybe healthcare systems, and what the procurement process looks like in a public setting. So I don't know if that's a relevant question to any of your practices, but it's a world I live in, so I'm curious about it.
So, sorry, Mike again. So in the public sector, one of the biggest problems we've got is we want to be designing and building these systems. So what we're constantly being faced with, okay, you can design it, but you can't build it. And that does become a bit of a problem to us. So we're trying to work our way around that at the moment. Yeah, it's a problem for sure with energy as a service for public buildings.
Anyone else with any public sector experience at the panel? No? Okay, totally new field.
Hi, everybody. This is Donovan, and I've talked to all of you in some way at some point, so glad you're here and hopefully find lots of business here. So the question I have is, it seems like a bunch of all of you, except I think Endurant, are like drilling companies. So you own your own drilling rigs. So is it from a quality control? Is it just that you want access? I mean, so part of the reasons why. You enter into 20 to up to 50-year agreements. Are there built-in rate increases? Because I know we want some stability, but you also don't want to be locked into $1 today that's not going to be worth $1 50 years from now. So how are you addressing that? And as you grow, what are your projections for the next 5 to 10 years? You're all big companies. You're in this space because you want to transition from fossil fuel to here. What are your projections in terms of your anticipated growth over the next 5 to 10 years?
Donovan, before you give that mic up, what was your first question about drilling? I guess I got the last two. I didn't. Are you guys just a statement or?
Oh no, basically you're basically drilling companies. Subterra, Celsius. You own drilling rigs. I'm just wondering, why you do that as opposed to subcontracting. Is it the quality? Is it just access? Just wondering, since you all own your rigs.
Yeah, I think in terms of answering that first piece, it's really about, build. I think Tony was just saying, right, there's plenty of opportunities to design a solution, but as you find yourself needing to be dependent on outside subcontractors in a network where there is obvious, obstacles currently in place in terms of delivery, that presents a challenge. So how are we overcoming that? It's trying to, of course, have your own licensure, assets, et cetera, in terms of delivery. It just goes well with eliminating those overall bottlenecks. In terms of the overall, rate over time, I mean, we try to get to a situation where there's absolutely a fixed cost over total duration of 20 to 30 years. Certainly there's others here with much more experience than me and our company in terms of how that is manifesting in terms of multi-dozen type projects, but we are absolutely working towards the attempt at a fixed rate type delivery over that life cycle cost or term.
So a couple reasons why we want to own the drills. I'd say there's two primary reasons. One, I think you mentioned, is the quality. When we're going to be the owners of these assets for a 30-year contract, I want to be very confident that what's going into the ground is done perfectly. So for that reason, we want to be the installer. Number two, and this is a really, really big one, is schedule control. If you're trying to be a middleman acting as an energy service supplier and you're trying to coordinate drillers down here to meet a developer's schedule up here, these guys who are developers always lie to you about what their project what their schedule is, but really they're always a couple months ahead, and the drillers are trying to line up jobs with another 5 or 10 developers who have the same ambitious timelines that never come true. So if you're trying to be in the middle of that and match make with the drillers, it becomes very, very difficult. So the schedule control is crucial for us, being able to manage our fleet when and where we need them. That's a really big piece for us. The rate schedule for us is a fixed schedule, and then we agree as part of the contract on an escalator. Typically, it's between 2.5% to 3%. Sometimes we'll structure it as the greater of that or CPI. But yeah, we will include an escalator in the contract as well.
And yeah, just to echo similarly, we're very much approaching this as we are the manufacturer of a ground loop system. So in the same way that you would procure a chiller or a cooling tower, an air handler that comes from a factory, we need all of that equipment. We need all of that manpower to make sure that we have control of the end product. And same reasons, technical schedule, there's a litany of risks that are associated with construction projects that we're looking to really eliminate or completely minimize with that approach. And then, yeah, similar to Matt, we're looking with generally fixed rate escalation is how we're going to market. But again, it's very case by case, and we can be flexible.
And Donovan, your third question was like a vision thing question, right? It was sort of where you see the market going in 5 years, right? Yeah, I'm curious to hear that.
Fully electric.
Yeah, word. Mic drop.
And there's potential for electric rigs. Thank you, Tony.
Anyone else want to add to the 5-year outlook?
Yeah, and I think even before that, I wanted to maybe circle back quickly to this drilling topic. I was going to say, just putting it out there, but simply controlling the actual rigs in terms of schedule control, delivery, that's critically important, but that doesn't ultimately give you full control of the installed system. There's a key component there, which is measurement and verification. So we are in a situation where we absolutely provide our own rigs when and where possible. As well, we are open and willing to train, coach, partner with drilling contractor providers who want to do it our way, right? Some of you might be familiar that our way is a bit different in terms of the incline drilling approach, but ultimately the key there is measurement and verification of what's installed, and only that is going to deliver performance assurance, performance guarantees to deliver a life cycle type cost management for the installed ground loop. In terms of overall projections, I mean 10 years is a very long projection, I would say, but certainly within the next 5 years, we expect to be a $100 million company within the U.S. And as much as I love the Northeast and being here in New York, I mean, we are looking at westward expansion. We're a global organization, and we plan on being everywhere.
We had rigs in the UK, and when the market goes this way, a lot of people start to disappear. So be careful. But I'm hoping. I don't think that's going to be the case in New York for sure. So. There's going to be a lot of drillers that are still out there looking for work. So we've got a preferred contractor list. So it's kind of maintaining that. We have a visible presence on site every time we do a project. So it's about maintaining that QA, QC. Again, making sure what we design is being built.
Just to touch on a couple things on the outlook, I'll say that this was perhaps one of the first questions. The biggest challenge that we've seen is status quo. Right, we constantly fight with a boiler chiller conventional approach, and we've been at this business for a little over 5 years now, and in the last, I'd say 6 months to a year, we've probably had more traction than we had in the first 4 years. So we've really felt the pendulum really starting to swing in a major way, at least in our market. So we are based out of Southern Ontario. We're serving across Canada, and we've got a couple projects that are starting up in the U.S. So we are definitely getting into this market and wanting to expand further and further south. The other thing that I'll mention is we really see ourselves and everybody in this room being part of the energy transition, and we're bringing a lot of drill rigs and drill talent from the oil and gas sector, specifically Fort McMurray in Alberta. If anybody knows that, there's a lot of drilling talent up there, and we really like this story from an ESG standpoint about actually pulling bodies out of there. And I know Schlumberger has told us similar stories about really trying to capture and be part of that energy transition. And so I think that everybody in this room, like I said, is part of that. But we're really seeing that in a very boots on the ground way with drills and drillers.
Okay.
So I'm a consultant, designer, advisor for energy matters for my clients, tackling their decarbonisation problems and pulling together the designs for energy solutions. obviously one option here is energy as a service. So my question really to you guys is, how can we involve you in early discussions, pre-commitment from a client, them putting out any kind of RFP to really flush out what energy as a service can offer for them and try and assign some numbers to that?
Great question. I think the earlier we can be involved in that process to make sure that there is a path for geothermal, that feasibility exists, and then really scoping, what makes the most sense for that end user, what their specific financial situation is. Maintaining that flexibility contractually while making sure that the application is the right fit, I think is the best way to approach that.
A couple very tactical pieces. We like to make sure that we're part of programming design, for example, with the architects. We want to make sure that you've allotted the right amount of space for the mechanical room. You're probably going to have savings somewhere, and you might need to put a pump room somewhere else. So making sure that they're thinking about those types of things, as well as any sort of requirements for site plan application, rezoning, building permit, et cetera. We want to make sure that we're involved and actually get in those drawing packages, because if you don't, you might be too late. And I had another thought that I can't remember now. I'll come back to me in a second.
As early as possible. I've won projects at the 11th hour, but most projects we need to be involved from the very early days. The NY-GEO Pond 4614s have been great. So we've just started our 10th NY-GEO feasibility study. And some of the developers that we've been working with have seen the kind of work that we do and are involving us at a very early stage in the process. So we're talking to their team. And, as I said, as I laid out in my presentation, it's about trying to build confidence and demonstrate CapEx and OpEx at the same time, and identify, there's more than just drilling boreholes for a geothermal solution. So what is the right solution for that particular project? Being part of the team is important, and coordination with other parties through the entire process. The energy model, as I keep mentioning, is super critical. So any changes that happen through the design process, the architect may decide, I want to change the windows here. I can change the U values. I can change the cooling requirements for the building. The geothermal design team need to know that, because that's going to affect ground loop sizing, basically. So yeah, we need to be part of the developers team.
Matthew, did you remember yours? Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for filling in. So the other thing I'll say is, before we enter definitive docs and finalize the agreement, we will have completed our feasibility study, which includes the desktop engineering study, do the energy model, do the loads, as well as a test hole to get the thermal conductivity of the ground. So we have a very good idea of how much it's going to cost, what the design is going to be, before we enter into the definitive docs. So once we've sort of entered into our MOU or LOI or whatever you want to get into, we'll go and do those tests at our cost before we enter into the final contract.
I was going to say just one more thing in terms of it's important that you're setting the stage for comprehensive involvement, total system involvement from somebody who is going to be willing to engage in an energy as a service contract. My personal perception of this industry is it's extremely fragmented, and you've got a lot of people in competition, if you will, for different slices and pieces of the pie. And there is plenty of, I think, to extend on what you were saying earlier, was kind of poisoning of the well, et cetera. And there's plenty of examples of that fragmented approach and drops in handoff, et cetera, amongst the different team members. So getting us involved early and setting the stage for the need to have comprehensive involvement on a total system approach is paramount.
Okay, great. We're at time, but last question, lightning round.
I think my question can cut to the chase.
Great.
All of the complexity that's necessary and good, effectively you become an unregulated utility. And as a consumer or a business owner, however the use is, you're entering a world where we don't have the guidelines. I don't question whether the gas is going to show up at my house or the power. I get it and it's done. Your world, and I like it, by the way, but it's a brand new Wild West. And Where is the initiative there to afford that? I mean, originally I could think, well, let's get some reinsurance in this deal, and that'll give me some financial stability, but that has nothing to do with delivering product. And so I think your group and many others like you need to take the initiative and get ahead of that curve and work with governmental entities. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm getting the cane, so maybe just, is it, I don't know, yeah. We'll talk to the PSC. How about that? Okay, thank you, everyone. Great question, though, and I think it gets us thinking. Thank you to the panel. Great, great audience questions. Thank you very much.